Welcome to the latest Motley Fool Scoreboard. I'm on a chocolate balloon. We've got longtime fools, Travis Hoium and Dan Caplinger, giving a 1 to 10 rating to a top 50 stock in the primary Hidden Gems database. It's Cal-Maine Foods, ticker symbol CALM. Talk about the strength of Cal-Maine's business first, including factors like industry and competition. 10 is invincible, a 1 is hopeless. Both of you have 7, Stan.
Yeah, Cal-Maine, a dominant player in the wholesale egg business, and this couldn't be a simpler business model. Produce eggs, sell eggs. But let's back up. There are some subtleties here. There's demand for specialty eggs. There's also the question of, okay, as you look for ways to diversify, can you start selling egg-based products that use your proprietary eggs? Cal-Maine's done a reasonably good job of exploring those expansion opportunities to try to get out of just being a pure commodity seller and therefore being entirely vulnerable to the ups and downs of the egg price markets.
Yeah, and look, that's the big story there is the egg price market. You have probably heard headlines about egg prices over the past couple of years. They were pretty normal, 50 cents or so per dozen for decades. 2022, they spiked. 2024, they spiked again, hitting $8 per dozen in early 2025. Today, that price is about 45 cents. So that's going to create a lot of volatility, and it just shows that at the end of the day, Cal-Maine is a commodity supplier of eggs because that is going to drive their financials. But I do want to bring a fun fact to the discussion here. The average Cal-Maine hen lays 325 eggs per year, generating about $100 in egg-based revenue per hen. So a lot of productivity from each of those hens.
That's right. Now, if we can just raise it or double it, can you imagine if we can get to 700 a year? No, that's the kind of bad thinking. For management, a 10 is Warren Buffett, a 1 is Homer Simpson. Travis is at a 7. Dan, you're at an 8.
Yeah, Sherman Miller's the CEO. He is a Cal-Maine lifer. He's got 30 years of his career at this company. He became chief operating officer in 2011, then graduated to the corner office in 2022. And over the past 3 or 4 years, he's dealt with a bunch of challenges in the industry. As Travis said, you had those big price spikes and then the big price decline. He's done a good job of kind of plotting a longer-term course strategy towards longer-term growth, keeping the company solid through all of those ups and downs.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to be really inspired by or any huge, red flags for Sherman Miller as CEO. So I just kind of went with a middle-of-the-road 7 here. We'll talk a little bit about financials, but I think the one thing is, at the end of the day, a lot of these financials are outside of his control, so you have to just be able to keep your costs low. They obviously have the scale to be able to do that, and so he has been integral in helping build that scale for Cal-Maine.
All right, for financials, a 10 is a fortress, a 1 is yikes. Travis is a 7, Dan, you're at an 8.
Yeah, I think it's important to put this in context. I'm not giving it an 8 because the profits have jumped as much as they've jumped recently, because that's all recent price volatility. What I'm looking at more is, as Travis said, what is in Cal-Maine's control? And Cal-Maine's strategy is to target markets where there's at least a little bit more pricing power, where consumers are willing to pay somewhat higher prices. That, even when you try to adjust for the market, you still have seen some evidence of margins getting higher in certain parts of Cal-Maine's business. I think that's what you want to see.
Yeah, the real challenge is that the recent profits for Cal-Maine are basically a mirage. Looking at their chart, 2023 and 2025, they basically generated more net income than they did between 2005 and 2021. So this is not going to be sustainable, especially with egg prices now coming down to about 45 cents. Unless we get some sort of dislocation like we've gotten over the past couple of years that drives prices higher. So I would have actually gone a little bit lower for the financials here, but there is also $1.1 billion in cash on the balance sheet. So rock solid balance sheet. At the worst, hey, with interest rates going up, maybe you get to collect a little bit of interest as a shareholder.
You might not think of Cal-Maine as in the same boat as oil and gas or miners, but they're all dependent on commodity prices, in this case eggs. So you gotta be really careful, even looking in the last few years and extrapolating out after a good period, at least in terms of prices. Travis, let's talk valuation. How well will Cal-Maine stock do over the next 5 years, and how safe is it? 10's a sure thing, 1's a lottery ticket.
Yeah, this is a real challenge because the valuation looks phenomenal today. Price earnings multiple on a trailing basis is about 3. But like I said, those current profits are really a mirage. Those are going to come down. So I set a pretty low expectation of 0 to 5% returns. Like I said, historically, this is a company that operates right near break even. That said, we're going to be buying eggs 20 years from now, and I think they'll still be around. So I went with a relatively high safety score.
I was a little more optimistic, 5 to 10%, but at the low end of that, slightly lower safety score of 6. I think even with earnings inevitably contracting, and they're going to, where that forward earnings multiple is likely to end up is still probably going to look attractive. The real question is, where is future growth going to come from? That's still a little bit murkier. That's why I'm kind of towards the middle of the spectrum on safety.
Yeah. And as Travis said, with a PE of 3, this is a great example of looking beyond the numbers. And why is that so low? You can't just rely on numbers like that, because it seems like a no-brainer buy if you can sustain that profitability. But prices will vary, right? Thanks to both Travis and to Dan. They've given Cal-Maine Foods a middling overall score of 6.5 out of 10 with no top-its. Look out for a new scoreboard every market day at 7 p.m. Eastern. Can't be putting all your eggs in one basket, so next up is something good, I promise. Till then, Fool on.